There's a really special person in this room. Most of you probably don't know, but it is an absolute joy to tell you that Lou Irwin is here. Lou was the original anchor on KABC Channel 7. He worked for numerous radio stations after that, also worked at KNBC, was produced by Joel at that point. And I've asked Lou if he would come back maybe in May and we can do a program around him. He's full of stories. We'll try to find some of the old film and video, and it is just a joy to have you here. So thank you. All right. One of the things this group has done over the years is to honor people, whether they've been part of our group or not, who have made very valuable contributions to our profession. And one of those is a long time brilliant photographer for Channel 2, going back to the KNXT days, and before that, KNBC. His name is Victor Anastasia. For a long time, he was known as Mick Anastasia, and I'll get Victor Jr. to explain to you about the name change. But I did want to tell you that I had the pleasure of working with him a couple of times at Channel 2. Some of you in the rest of the room, Linda, you must have shot stories with Vic somewhere along the way.
Very many times.
Yeah, and Dave Lopez, and there are others in here who know what a brilliant, just nice, creative man he was. We lost him in August due to complications from various strokes that he suffered. He was 80. What was his age? 81. He was 81. He was 81. A bunch of us gathered very recently down at the wonderful Japanese gardens at Cal State Long Beach, had a memorial for him, and this is the whole group of us who were there. And some of these people are right here in the room with us. So I'm going to ask in just a moment some of you to come up and speak. This was afterwards. This is where we got together for a bit of a drink up at an Irish bar in Long Beach. It was just a great day of remembering Vic and so many wonderful stories. I would like to introduce to you Victor Anastasia, Jr. And Victor's going to take you through some other pictures of his dad, some of which you probably have seen before, all of which I think you will enjoy. Victor, it's a pleasure.
Thank you, Bob.
Come on up and we'll go through these.
All right. Well, this is a photo of my dad when he was at Cal State LA. He first moved to Los Angeles. He wanted to become an actor. And so I believe that's one of his first headshots. I don't know the date of that. This is probably a photo of my father at the KCBS assignment desk. Unfortunately, I don't know the dates on a lot of these, but I probably early 60s when my dad first started working at CBS. And you could see just how happy and eager he was to do his job, and he really enjoyed being a news photographer. This, I don't know the location, but of course that's Ronald Reagan. That's my dad, dated 1978. And the person standing next to him in the coat is Ray Armendariz.
Did you see who signed this?
Yeah.
Joseph Benty.
Now, who's that? You'll have to educate me on that.
Joe, who has come to these lunches, was a long time Los Angeles anchor, still very much alive, lives out in Calabasas, and has been long here before. I produced with Joe at KNXT, so I remember him very well. Before your time, let's put it that way.
Yeah. That's my dad shooting out a Chopper 2 back in the days when you just had to strap yourself in and lean out the window. And there was many occasions when I was a young man, 12, 13 years old, that I would actually go up with him. That's a picture of my dad, mid-80s, probably 85. First time him and my mother went to Athens, Greece. My father loved to travel and went to Europe many times, and brought the family with him. That was my dad. Shortly after the death of my mother, He went on a cruise to Alaska. And that's the fish he caught. That's me and my dad last Father's Day, at BJ's restaurant in Torrance, celebrating Father's Day.
It's a pleasure, and our sympathies to you and
Thank
your
you.
family. He was a great man. I just enjoyed knowing him
Great.
tremendously.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me.
There are a few of you that I know want to speak about Vic Anastasia, and I'd like to start with Professor Joe Saltzman. Hello, Joe.
Hi. It's nice being in a room where I'm not the oldest person. It's nice to see all of you. I'm going to tell you a story about how I met Vic and how we got him to CBS. It has a lot of detail, and I'll try and make it as fast as I can. I first met Vic more than 45 years ago in September 1973, when I was a senior producer of nonfiction television for the 5 CBS-owned and operated television stations. I had sold the network on approving a weekly series called It Takes All Kinds. My conceit was to feature 2 segments a week showing what it was like to be a bartender or a bus driver or teacher without written narration and a heavy emphasis on actualities. So I desperately needed a cameraman who not only had a good eye, but also had a great deal of stamina, since in those days, lugging a sound camera on your shoulder for most of the day called for not only strength, but also endurance. I had interviewed close to 24 cameramen, including all of the CBS cameramen who were mostly old-time newsreel shooters, such as Jack Leppert and Sam Greenwald. Most of them said the assignment sounded like hell and no thanks. Others who were interested didn't have reels that justified any confidence, so I was getting desperate. Someone in the newsroom who knew of my dilemma told me that there was this guy at NBC who was young and pretty good. I asked him if he had a name. He said the guy was Vic something, Natalie or Asia or something like that. I called my friends at NBC who immediately knew I was looking for Vic. I asked them if they would give him my CBS number because I wanted to talk to him. You're not going to steal him away from us, are you? They asked, and I honestly answered I didn't know. 10 minutes later, Vic called. I gave him my name, and he said, "Yeah, I've been told all about you. You're that hotshot producer who takes a year to do a documentary, then wins all those awards and acts like an arrogant know-it-all. I've heard you're mean, always yelling at people, and impossible to work with because you're never satisfied." I asked him who told him that. He said, "Everybody." After a second, I told him briefly about the show and asked him if he would like to talk to me about it. He said he would see me in 30 minutes. In walked Vic, and he immediately flashed that Vic grin and said, "So tell me what you expect from your cameraman." I told him how the actualities on this show would make or break our program. I told him I expected him to capture everything on film that happened in a day in the life of whoever we were filming. When I finished painting a horrible picture of what his life would be like day after day, he looked at me, smiled, and said, "Sounds like fun." No one I had ever worked with before ever said that the job might be fun. Immediately, I walked him over to personnel, and Vic was hired on the spot. CBS had no place to put our staff, so we finally ended up in the old CBS recording studio at Sunset and Gower. The sound booth became our editing booth, and the large studio became our office. It was so big we had room for a ping pong table. When Vic saw it, he laughed and said, "If I beat you, will you fire me?" When we first got a look at Vic's footage, the editor, you may know him, T. Basesto, he recently died, great editor. T and I were delighted. Vic not only had a good eye, but he did something few cameramen ever did. He kept the camera rolling, even when the sequence seemed to be over, and the 10 seconds or a minute of extra film were usually golden. He got us the kind of complete coverage producers dream about, and he never complained. He always came to work ready to do the job, and best of all, he was the nicest guy I've ever met in the newsroom. From November 73 to May 74, Vic produced some of the best documentary film I have ever worked with. Then I made what would turn out to be a major error in judgment. Gays were becoming more active, declaring homosexuality was not a mental illness. There were many incidents of gay bashing and hatred. I decided we should do a program finding 6 gay men, a doctor, a lawyer, a clerk, a teacher, a bank teller, so on, who looked as straight as anyone in the room, but would calmly tell us what it was like to be gay in an anti-gay society. The program was a tremendous success in the gay community, and we were asked to do another program on lesbians, which we did. What I hadn't understood is the hatred of gays prevalent in the United States at that time. All the stations who aired the program received hundreds of phone calls, letters, and threats about the program, saying they would never watch CBS again. Our people in the field were threatened, and that included Vic and the many different sound people we worked with. And sponsors were nervous about being associated with the program. In May 1974, CBS reneged on its promise to keep the program on for a year and canceled the show. I was furious and told the executives they had promised everyone on the staff the year they had promised me. They said that was my problem. I held a staff meeting to tell everyone that the show was canceled, that I would be resigning my position over the matter. Television was no longer interested in social interest nonfiction programming, so I was going to USC to start a broadcasting sequence there. After the meeting, Vic pulled me aside, jokingly asking if he could go with me. We laughed, and I said, wait here. I walked to the old Bank of America building, which housed the KNXT newsroom, and talked to news director Bill Ames and the assignment editor Bob Long. I started telling them about Vic, and Long stopped me, saying they had seen the show and the footage was amazing, and they would hire him. Ames interrupted, as news directors do, to say there wasn't an opening, and Bob said they could hire him as a freelancer 5 days a week until something opened up. I went back and told Vic, who gave me a big bear hug and that great grin. I told him they were waiting for him in the newsroom. Vic left, looked back at me and shouted, "Thanks a lot, Professor. See you later." Whenever I saw Vic in the years ahead, whether it be in the Channel 2 newsroom or whenever he came to USC to do an interview, he would see me coming, flash that grin, and shout, "Hey, Professor, how's it going?" I always thought of Vic as much younger than I was, but I just discovered he was actually more than a year older than me. We only worked together for about 8 months, but Vic is etched into my memory with a fondness and a joy of remembrance. He was a good man who always did his job with competence, with professionalism, with a keen eye, and a passionate heart. I wish I had one more chance to hear him say to me, "Hey, Professor, how's it going?" I miss him very much. Rest in peace, dear Vic.
Professor, that was brilliant. You captured Vic to a T. You talk about the age. Vic never talked about his age. Never. You know, the press pass, he had when date of birth, he had that blocked out. And he always told me that he was 50. He was 50 when I met him. He was 50 when he retired. And the last time I saw him, when he had his stroke, he wasn't able to talk. And I said, "Vic, how old are you?" I swear to God, he said 50. Vic was a marvelous man. I knew Vic Jr. when he was like 5 years old, I think, Vic. Remember, your dad would bring you on Saturdays when once in a while I'd work with Vic on a Saturday, not that often, but then he'd bring you along all the time, and we went out to your place in Agua Dulce. I got hired at Channel 2 in 1977, and Vic was one of the first cameramen I worked with. He was gregarious, he was wholesome, he was funny, he loved to eat, loved Italian food, loved to tell stories. He was married to a wonderful woman. Your mother was a marvelous woman. She got ill, and Vic was a prolific reader. He also had a great faith that someday she'd be cured of her illness. She had a lung disease, if I remember. And Vic took her all over the world. He'd read about a cure somewhere, and off he'd go. He didn't care where it was. Greece, overseas, anywhere. He was determined and dedicated to saving your mother's life. When my wife passed away, Vic was the first guy that called me. We kind of bonded over that as well. But I love Vic as a brother. And I miss him dearly, I really do, even though he's been gone since I stopped work with him when he retired in 2002. But you know, I still feel very badly about the fact that he had a stroke and the way he lived his last couple of months of his life, it was very, very painful to see him because he was so gregarious and so full of life and so wonderful. You know, you always get in trouble when you tell someone, oh, you're the best, you're the best. But I've worked with a lot of cameramen. I've been working in LA since 1972, 77 at Channel 2. Don Menzel, phenomenal cameraman. Lou Varela, phenomenal cameraman. But Vic was a whole package. Vic made me, every reporter that worked with Vic was much better because they worked with Vic. And he loved his job. He loved his job. But he also hated overtime. I'll tell the quick story about that. Channel 2 was known for the longest time. You go to work at Channel 2, and you're going to make overtime. It's automatic. Overtime and meal penalties. And I don't know how the other stations work, but at CBS in those days, it was $25 if you didn't get a meal. Now, who in the hell gets a meal during covered news? You know, it's ridiculous. You know, so every time the desk would call about lunch, Vic would go crazy. You know, it says $25 out of my, in fact, talk that way, $25 out of my pocket, damn it, Lopez. $25 a day. I work 5 days a week, sometimes 6. That's $150 a week. That's $600 a month. That's $7,200 a year. And he'd add it all up, all in his head. Then it got to be $30 for the meal penalty. Then it got to be $32 for a meal penalty. And man, he would flip whenever he had to take a meal. Didn't matter. He just would not take a meal. So his longtime buddy, Joe Takarsh, sent me a note after Vic passed away. Joe retired and went to live up in Oregon. And he did a little kind of a scenario on what it was like when Vic was told he had to take a lunch. So he says, Vic and I are in the truck. We get the call from the desk. Vic would say, Joe would say, okay, Unit 24. This is Unit 4. This is Unit 4. We're calling the desk. We're done here at Dodger Stadium. We're all wrapped up. So what's on the menu? And Vic would say, "Don't say menu, damn it! They're gonna put us on lunch. Don't say menu." But Vic would have more excuses why he couldn't take a lunch. He had more excuses why he needed to get overtime. There was a very famous story. Somebody said it was a fire. Somebody said it was something else. Whatever, him and Joel were assigned to go to a mountaintop somewhere. I think it was a fire. And they said, stay there in case the fire goes over the crest. We'll call you. Just be there. So they did. Nobody on the desk called them. 11 o'clock news is over. Nobody calls them. It's midnight. Nobody calls them. It's 1 o'clock in the morning. Nobody calls them. So finally, a guy named Steve Crawford comes in. His morning shift comes in at 5 a.m., and he sees that Vic and Joel haven't logged in. So hey, Unit 4, you on the air? Yeah. Where are you guys? We're on the mountaintop. Nobody called us. You've been on the clock this whole time? We sure have. Well, get in here. The story I heard, they were in Laguna Beach, and Vic found a way to drive back to the station at Sunset and Gower using side streets the whole way. I loved your dad, Vic. I loved your dad. You're a wonderful son. I know what you went through the last part of his life, and I congratulate you on how you handle it. And I know right now he's smiling down, probably eating a big pizza. Love pizza, ravioli, spaghetti. That was Vic. Loved to tell a joke. And he's probably saying, you know what? I ain't getting a lunch. I'm not getting any lunches up here. It's great. That'd be Vic. God bless you, Vic. Take care. Bye.
And ladies and gentlemen, Lou Varela.
Well, I met Vic in 1969. And he always had this good way about him. And the serious side that I can remember about him is when his son got his first job in Alaska. At that time, I think unfortunately, his daughter, Anastasia, had passed away, and his wife has passed away. And I was working with him, and he says, I got to take some vacation. My son got a job in Alaska. And I said, you guys going to fly up? No, we're driving up because you got to take everything. I said, you're driving from here to Alaska? He goes, yeah, he's got a lot of stuff. And I said, well, why don't you let him drive and you meet him or something? He goes, no, I've lost a couple of people from my family. I'm not losing another one. And that was the serious side of Vic. And he would always say to me, he would tell me what happened, and then he'll tell me, I never want to talk about this again, so don't bring it up. And that is the serious side of Vic. Now, the funny side of Vic is his expression, Louie, we're making money. And that happened one night. There was a big heavy rains in Malibu, and we just did, the side of the road had collapsed, and you couldn't go through Pacific Coast Highway. And 11 o'clock just wanted a live shot of the road, and it's pouring. And I said, oh, come on, Vic, it's raining. Louie, we're making money. I said, okay. You do the shot, I'm staying in the truck so I don't get wet. Okay. So he gets in the truck, we do the live shot from 11, and so he says, oh, I'm gonna call in. Okay. And so, about 11:30, 20 to 12, we wrap up. And he gets a call. Yeah, no problem. We'll do it. I said, and then he hangs up and said, we'll do what? And he says, the network wants a live shot at 7 o'clock in the morning. And I said, yeah, but it's only 11:40. He goes, Louie, we're making money. So that's really Vic. His times he wanted to do something. He knew that I couldn't say no to him when he'd tell me, Louie, we're making money. And that's the way Vic was. There's a story similar to Dave's, but the way I heard it was that there was a train wreck in Simi Valley. And the car was still on the tracks, and it was at Sycamore in Los Angeles there. And they had to do a live shot. They did a live remote. So once they were done, they call in, and the people on the desk are scrambling. Hey, don't bother us, Unit 4. Don't bother us. We got things to do. We'll call you. And they go, okay. Yeah. So early in the morning, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, they find out that Unit 4 is not here. Unit 4, where are you? Hey, we're waiting for the phone call. You said not to bother you. So he said, get in here. And so, again, it took him 2 hours to get to Hollywood from Simi Valley. So that's the way Vic was. And his expression always in my head, no matter if we went to lunch or dinner, Louie, we made some money. And that's Vic Anastasia for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Dave. And thank you, Professor. Anybody else like to come up and say anything about our dear departed Vic Anastasia? No, we remember him fondly, and again, all of us send our sympathies to the family. And Victor and Irene, thank you very much for being here. I did not have the pleasure of working with Jack Perkins. Some of you did, and you're all very lucky, because I think that Jack Perkins up there with Charles Kuralt was one of the greatest writers and storytellers ever to grace the television business. He was 85 when he died in August at home in Nokomis, Florida, which is south of Sarasota. Some of you, I know, worked with him at Channel 4. How many of you that are here now worked with him at Channel 4? Wow, that's a lot. We're going to hear from some of you in a moment. Then, of course, he went later on to NBC News, where Jack covered the civil rights movement, Vietnam War, of a lot of other big stories, and he went on then to host Biography for A&E. And in later years, we remember him like this. And for 8 years, he hosted a weekly magazine series for WEDU television in Sarasota called Gulf Coast Journal. You can still find it on YouTube. And as you'll see in a moment, he had a very great fondness for a very special place, an island in Maine. And the obit on Jack in the New York Times contains a paragraph that I would like you to read. I said, good for him when I read that. It's remarkable. In 1986, Jack escaped TV news for a while to enjoy life with his wife in a cabin that they built in Moosewood. They called it Moosewood. It was on an island off Bar Harbor, Maine, near Acadia National Park, which is just a beautiful part of the world. And what you're about to see is frankly an outright commercial. It is for one of the books that Jack wrote while he was living with his wife in the island, in the cabin called Moosewood. And I think you'll enjoy it because it's typical Jack Perkins and how we remember him.
Hello, I'm Jack Perkins on the coast of Maine. I used to host A&E's biography series, but before that, for 35 years, I worked in television news. That was a great time. There was excitement, there was adventure, a slight bit of celebrity, and enough acclaim to coddle the ego. So why, at the height of my career, would I give all that up? Because of this island. It is called Bar Island. My wife and I moved here, built a cabin, and became the only residents of this small island. Now, without public utilities, we had solar panels on the roof for electricity, very limited electricity. We had a well for water, wood stove for heat. We were fine, and we named the place Moosewood. Now, there's a special reason behind that name, and I talk about it in my new memoir called Finding Moosewood, Finding God. Titled that because, you see, this island is where we came to realize that the glories of nature that surrounded us every day, even in the bleak of winter, that those glories were not the glories of nature at all, but the glories of the God who brought us here, who gave us new lives when we were here, and new faith. Finding Moosewood, Finding God, tells that story. And friends, that is the best story this old newsman ever had to report.
John Marshall, who you're going to hear from in a moment, has been in touch with Jack's son, Eric. Jack works for the NBC affiliate in Minneapolis, KARE, Channel 11, so he's followed in his old man's footsteps. He's a sports anchor and sports director there. So I would like to start with John. I know Eric would have loved to have been here, and we would have loved to have had him. John Marshall.
I just finally got around to reading Finding Moosewood, and I just started, frankly, and it's a whole new Jack Perkins that I didn't understand at the time. To be specific, Jack was a very good friend and colleague, working as an NBC correspondent out of the Burbank Bureau in the 70s, and as a news anchorman, teaming up with our Kelly Lang at KNBC in the early 80s. He was a thoughtful journalist. There aren't too many left these days, but he was a thoughtful journalist, not like many of the others. He had an exceptional talent for writing words that complemented the video, as he worked with some of the best camera people and editors in our Burbank studios, some of which are here in this room today. Sometimes there were no words as he let the video play sound up full. You heard the planks on the truck there for a moment. You felt it. He let the pictures tell the story. His words, his thoughts could be understood by anyone. That's the most distinctive thing I can say about this guy. It's what I saw through the years. He was truly, as Bob said, a storyteller, and he had a way of making us feel the story. He knew how to make us laugh, he knew how to make us cry, but most of all, think. Now, he joined NBC back in 1961 as a writer and a
protege of David Brinkley in Washington. And watching and learning from Brinkley on the Huntley-Brinkley Report is where it began. Decades later, in 2012, Jack told the local newspaper in Florida, the Longboat Observer, quote, "What Brinkley taught me was a master class in how TV news should be written. Say less, mean more. If a story is dramatic," he said, "you certainly don't have to tell it dramatically. Be simple, be direct." Now, I'd like to tell you a little story of my own. Some of you may have heard it, but not all of you. You probably, some of you, may remember that they fired me. It was a big deal at the time. They fired me for no good reason back in 1992, after 20 wonderful years at Channel 4. The banner headline in the Times calendar section said, "Axing the best reporter in town." Now, that shocked me at the time when I read it. It still shocks me today. It's a quote that Howard Rosenberg got from Warren Cheragino over here, news director at Channel 5 at the time. I've always known you're full of shit. Anyway, that's what the headline said. Well, when that happened, Jack Perkins immediately wrote me a letter. He wrote to me on his Moosewood stationery, I'll have you know, bearing the name of that, actually it was his cabin on the small island near Bar Harbor, which Bob just told you about, the island that he and wife Mary Jo escaped to from LA. Now, he told me in this letter, there was nothing more to prove at KNBC, having done it all and done it well, his words, not mine. He suggested maybe it was time to take what he called a life break and find new things and new worlds in which to find achievement and happiness. Well, I framed that letter and I put it front and center in the airplane hangar at Whiteman Airport up north in Pacoima, and that's where I have spent most of the time since then. And I got to tell you, Jack was right. I did find a new life, many new and wonderful friends, and a new world I wouldn't otherwise have even known about. So today, my friends, I would like to suggest that we all stand and give a final ovation to Jack Perkins and the great memories of the man and his work, and there was only one. Please stand. Here's to Jack, wherever you are. I think he will know. And here's hoping somehow, some way, he's taking a life break and finding a new world that's far better than this one.
Diane, would you like to say something?
I have a Jack story, very quick.
This is Diane Wildman.
Thank you, Bob. I'm Diane Wildman. I was working at KNBC in the 70s, and there was a field producer opening upstairs in Locals, and I ran up there very quickly and said, "Can I please apply for this?" And I got the job, and Jack was one of my colleagues, and I thought, and he thought, I'm sure, who is this 12-year-old who has come upstairs to work for us? Is very young and very green. But he and others in that wonderful bureau helped me learn a lot. And one day, after I'd been there for a bit, I had an assignment to go with Jack and a camera crew to where he wanted to go. He pretty much shot named his own stories. And it was New Orleans for the opening of the new Superdome, which was at the time a hugely historic moment because it was the biggest roof and the biggest stadium and so on. And Jack had an image. He always had an image. I know what to do. I can figure this out. I know what the visual is. And we went down there, and he said to us, "Do you see that long, tall building across the street? I want you to go over there and get up there and be on, well, the roof if you can." And we thought, okay, and it was some kind of high-rise or a skyscraper of sorts. So we managed, and we climbed, and we got up there, and what he wanted us to do, he had told us before we went, was to shoot very wide to show the building, and then to gradually, you know, go closer to the doorway where he was standing with his message. And whatever it was, it explained, here I am in this amazing moment, and down to the point of the story, and we went from there. What he didn't tell us at the time, because he made us go all the way back and do this again, was that there was an addendum in one of these. We did this regular opening that he wanted, but then on the third or fourth one, whatever it was, he had said to follow him as he walked out of this doorway, down the street to a phone booth. And he got into the phone booth and he said to the camera, which was now, we had figured it out, down closer, and he said, I'm taking a nickel out of here because I want to show you the last phone booth in America that'll call for a nickel. And this was why he was so ingenious. He had in the back of his mind this constant campaign of that one or others that he could collect as he went along for other stories. And he'd stick these in his back pocket and think, I'm going to check that phone booth. I'll bet it's the last one that might be, who knows if it was, but that's what he declared. And it worked for a nickel, and I thought it was ingenious. Jack never stopped teaching me. All you had to do was pay attention to him. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you, John. Is there anybody else in here who would like to talk about the great Jack Perkins? Well, he will be remembered. As I say, I regret I never met him, but I was a long admirer. So we move on, and this was the last lunch of 2019, so it rounds out our 9th year, and next year we're going to begin our 20th year. And I did want to tell you about the lunches that are coming up and the dates if you guys want to take notes. The first one will be, these are all Saturdays, February 29th, May 16th, July 25th, and October 24th. Now let me tell you about the 29th of February, that's our next one. And all the credit for this one goes to Steve Skutsky, who's sitting right here, who gave me the inspiration for this. And a lot of you have said amen to that. And it will be on the history of the LA News choppers. And that is obviously KTLA Channel 5s of some incarnation there. And I'm going to ask all of you in here to give me help. I'm coordinating much of this with somebody that you know, and that's Vince Mack, who until recently spent decades working as a photographer for KTTV, Fox 11, and Sky Fox, just recently left that position, and normally is sitting where Andrew Lucero is sitting right now and shooting this. He's on vacation in Texas at the moment, so he's not here. But I've talked to him, he's talking to others in the industry, and a lot of you can give me advice as to who we should talk to, and I would love to hear from you and bring in people who can illuminate this area, which has been so important to television news. I think it'll be a great program. So again, that's February 29th. That'll be our first program of the year 2000, and it will be the history of the LA News choppers. Again, thank you, Steve, for suggesting it. There's our dates, February 29th, May 16th, July 25th, and October 24th, all of them in 2020. And as we wrap up here, I just want to tell you I will see you on the 29th here. Last bit of business is to wish you a very happy series of holidays. Happy Thanksgiving, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, and Happy New Year. And God bless you all. Thank you for making this work for the last 10 years. Drive carefully.